You're the one who should deal with the useless one. Gavin, my husband of many years, said, making me feel so frustrated that I was on the verge of tears. To make matters worse, our eldest son and his wife nodded in agreement. Are they planning to push me, who has become terribly ill after a long battle with my disease, onto our younger son and his wife, who have returned home for the first time in decades? I feel bad to our younger son and his wife, who have just come back, that I can't even raise my face. It's okay. Whether he knew of my feelings or not, our younger son Ian easily agreed. I ended up living with my younger son and his wife. And hell awaited my eldest son, his wife and Gavin, who had thrown me out of the family home. My name is Debbie, a 67-year-old housewife this year. My husband Gavin is 70. He's retired from the front line of work, now holding a position as a director at his former company. There are stories everywhere about couples divorcing in their later years, but we think we're still safe for now. A few years ago, I fell ill, becoming bedridden, and to support me, our eldest son and his wife came back to live at home. Our eldest son Hugo is a good, considerate child, and his wife Effie is a bright woman who graduated from a prestigious university and a reliable wife. I'm truly grateful that they've come back to this small town. When we started living together with our eldest son and his wife, Effie asked me to teach her how to do household chores. Since each household has its way of doing things, she wanted to follow my methods, which made me really appreciate her as a good wife. I carefully taught her everything, saying, "This is how we do it here, but feel free to do it in a way that's easier for you," while showing her all the household chores. I felt relieved, thinking I could now focus on battling my illness. But I was naive. After teaching her the household chores, I felt like I had handed everything over to Effie, but it seems Effie didn't see it that way. At that time, I was recuperating at home, with days spent lying down and getting up. There were days when I felt all right and days when moving a single finger was excruciating. "Debbie, you'll get senile if you just sleep all the time. Continuing to live as usual is the best treatment," Effie said, entering my room where I was recuperating without even knocking and briskly opening the curtains with a loud noise. That day, my condition was at its worst, and the brightness of the sunlight only made my headache worse. "Effie, could you close the curtains, please? I'm not feeling well today." While nursing a headache, I pleaded with Effie. Then Effie, standing with her hands on her hips, looked down at me and let out an exaggerated sigh. It was clear she thought I was just pampering myself. "That's where you're wrong. You're getting headaches because you're always lying down. Getting some sunlight and cleaning the yard will make you feel better." I was nearly dragged out of bed and taken to the front door. I was terrified at the thought they might actually make me clean the yard. "Mom, you're feeling good today, huh? Effie told me you're going to clean the yard. But maybe you should change out of your pajamas first," Hugo, on his way to work, said with a smile after seeing me standing frozen in my pajamas at the entrance. "It's not that, Effie is insisting. She says getting some sunlight will make me feel better, but I'm actually feeling quite ill today and have a terrible headache," I explained to Hugo. However, my plea didn't seem to reach him. With a dramatic sigh, very much like Effie, he said in a sullen tone, "That's why your illness is dragging on. It's troublesome for Effie and me when you're always in bed. Don't make things harder. Effie's burden will only increase. We need you to cooperate with what you can do. Don't keep indulging in your illness." I was dumbfounded by Hugo's words. He clearly meant no harm. Yet, he spoke as if I had been feigning my illness all this time. He hadn't been like this before. "So, get dressed properly and then go clean the yard," he said, brushing past me as he left for work. From this point on, my illness began to be treated as if it were just a pretense. Effie, who had attended doctor's appointments with me and heard directly about my condition, knew well that it wasn't fake. Yet, both Gavin and Hugo stopped showing the concern they once had, instead adopting a nearly resentful attitude towards me. It was as if they were thinking, "Why are you always lying in bed?" Buckling under this silent pressure, I started to actively take on household chores whenever I felt well enough. It seemed like the only way to ensure I had a place in the house. Effie became a housewife upon moving back to her parents' house, quitting her job. Originally career-oriented, Effie wanted to become a housewife after being shocked by a junior surpassing her. For Effie, who graduated from a prestigious university and worked diligently at a famous company, it must have been her first real setback in life. Perhaps that's why Effie's personality seemed to have twisted slightly. I could sympathize with her, but I couldn't stand her taking her frustrations out on me. "I've taken care of all the hospital reports. You don't need to talk about it, Debbie." Hugo doesn't like hearing the same story over and over, Effie would always say, making sure I didn't speak up. True, Hugo has a short temper and dislikes repetitive stories. I understand he gets irritated if things aren't communicated succinctly and accurately. If Effie continues spreading false information to Hugo and Gavin, I'll end up being portrayed as a mother-in-law who's just pretending to be ill and lazy. Moreover, rumors have started spreading in the neighborhood that I'm intentionally lying in bed to make Effie's life difficult. When I first heard the rumor, I was so shocked that I became speechless. I would have remained oblivious if a close neighborhood friend had not told me about it. What's more, she said Gavin had heard it too. I wanted my husband, Gavin, to be on my side. I remember feeling so frustrated that I almost cried. Even when I tried to tell Gavin the truth, Effie would cunningly interfere. We hardly had any conversations as a couple anymore. It felt like Effie had taken control of everything in the house. If this continues, I might get kicked out of the house. I began to fear by the thought of it. And unfortunately, that bad feeling turned out to be true. On a rainy day, when my health had deteriorated more than ever before, my head felt too heavy to lift, and I couldn't get out of bed. No one was there to care for me as I suffered from an endless headache and ringing in my ears. Recently, Gavin had snapped at me. "Stop lying in bed all the time." Normally, such words might motivate me to move, but I was in no condition to do so this time. "I can't move. It's impossible for me to do any housework. Can't you see that?" I retorted, only for Gavin to glare at me furiously. Behind him, I could see Effie standing with a smile, seemingly enjoying seeing me getting yelled at by Gavin. "Effie, you don't need to bother with her anymore. You don't need to take care of a lazy person." Gavin spat out before forcefully closing the door. The loud sound of the door closing made my headache worse. Lying in bed, despaired, realizing my words no longer reached my family. From that day on, no one took care of me. Meals were not brought, no cleaning was done, and I was not informed about shower times. Neglected, I lay in bed every day, listless. In such a situation, my health couldn't possibly improve. My condition worsened day by day, and I started to fear for my life. During these dark times, my younger son and his wife visited the family home for the first time in years. Ian, my younger son, wasn't very close to Hugo. He also had a strained relationship with his father, Gavin, and hadn't been around much since going to college and starting work. He got married 5 years ago, and even then, he just sent a wedding photo as his way of announcing it. It was only on this day that I learned his wife's name was Frances, and she looked like a model. "I'm sorry, I've been feeling unwell and have been bedridden. I haven't been able to take a bath. Do I smell bad?" I'm truly sorry. I must have had a stale smell because I hadn't been able to bathe for so long. The sheets were stained, and the air in the room was stale. Please don't worry about it. It's understandable when you're not feeling well. Let us know if there's anything we can help with. Being spoken to kindly for the first time in a while, I started to tear up. Seeing me suddenly overflow with tears, Frances seemed to sense something. Gently wiping my tears with a handkerchief, she smiled and said, "It's okay. Ian will take care of everything." If she said so, maybe everything really would be all right. That hope started to grow in my chest. I thought Frances and Ian would persuade my eldest son and his wife and Gavin. That evening, for the first time in a long while, all family members gathered in the living room of our family home. Hugo seemed irritated by Ian's mere presence, visibly annoyed throughout. Effie, perhaps fearing her misdeeds would be exposed, acted suspiciously. "Can someone explain why Mom is in this condition?" Ian was the first to break the silence in the living room. His tone was calm, but I could tell he was holding back anger. "Coming back after so long and starting with complaints. Don't talk if you've never bothered to take care of things," Hugo retorted in a tit-for-tat manner. "If you had been properly taking care of her, she wouldn't be in this state," Ian said, pointing at me. I felt so pitiful and embarrassed that I looked down. Stepping in between the glaring brothers was Dad, Gavin. He looked at both of them and finally at me. "You're the one who should deal with the useless one," were the unbelievable words that came from Gavin's mouth. I looked up sharply from my bowed head. The face of Gavin I saw bore a distasteful smile. Probably, he wasn't serious. I thought he said it just to trouble Ian. We didn't know anything about Ian's whereabouts after he graduated from college. All we heard was that he kept changing jobs right after graduation. It's unlikely that situation has changed. Economically, it was unrealistic for me to live with my younger son and his wife. Above all, I didn't want to be a burden to them. "What are you saying?" "I can't impose on Ian and his wife," I blurted out, but Ian calmly said, "It's okay. I'll take Mom with me." "Dad, Hugo, you have no complaints, right? And don't expect me to give her back," Ian stated. And so, it was decided that I would be taken in by my younger son and his wife. Ian, who has always been decisive, began packing for our departure the moment he made up his mind. Gavin, who seemed not to have expected Ian to actually take me with him, watched our packing with an uneasy look. That was to be expected. This family home belonged to my parents. My parents had cherished Gavin like their own son after he lost his parents at a young age. To drive me out of this house was to betray my parents. He must be feeling some guilt. Contrary to Gavin was the eldest son and his wife. They seemed to welcome the idea of me being taken in by my younger son and his wife. Effie's excitement was particularly glaring. She began discussing remodeling plans right in front of me, doing whatever she pleased. Ian seemed too appalled to even speak. "Debbie, let's make sure not to forget anything important. I want to keep your parents' photos and your memories safe at our place," Frances offered, and I nodded in agreement. I was worried our belongings might be a nuisance in the urban home of my younger son and his wife. "Just Debbie is enough of a burden, and now you're bringing all these bulky memories. The baggage just got heavier." Effie's mocking words hurt me. However, Frances simply smiled serenely and said, "It's okay, Effie." She wasn't paying any attention to Effie from the start. Her composed demeanor seemed to irritate Effie, which gave me a slight sense of relief. Arriving at my younger son and his wife's home, I was so surprised I inadvertently exclaimed, "Huh?" They lived in a large condominium, the likes of which I'd never seen in the countryside. and the elevator took us up to a high floor.
Ian, can you afford living in such a place? You're not involved in any weird or dangerous jobs, are you?
Laughing heartily, Ian reassured me.
It's all good.
Upon entering the apartment, I found my belongings had already been moved in, and everything was arranged for a comfortable life. A room was dedicated to my parents' memorabilia. Photos were already hung, and fresh flowers were beautifully arranged. I work during the day as well. Housekeeping is managed by a maid, so please take your time to relax, Debbie. I've also scheduled a doctor's appointment at the university hospital for tomorrow, so let's go together. Everything was so perfectly arranged that I was continually amazed. That evening, we enjoyed a delicious meal prepared by the maid and had a lively time. The warm meal, the first in a long while, tasted so good it felt like it could immediately improve my health. However, I was puzzled about how Ian, who had been job hopping, could afford such a lifestyle. I decided to ask him about it.
After various experiences, I'm now running a restaurant. I worked at a 5-star restaurant before deciding to open my own place, and Francis was a huge help when I was starting out.
Learning about Ian's efforts and achievements brought me close to tears. I felt nothing but gratitude towards Francis for supporting Ian.
But Mom, why did you have to endure so much at our family home?
To his question, I began to recount the events at home, including my illness and the onset of living with my eldest son and his wife. How the workload increased and my health worsened. While speaking, I realized how the injustice of my situation became apparent. Despite it being my home, I had been struggling to be allowed to stay.
Talking about it like this, I feel foolish for having endured it all. I don't even know why I was being so considerate.
It felt like the fog in my mind had finally cleared. Maybe it's time for a little revenge. I wasn't going to do anything if Mom said she forgives Hugo and the rest, but maybe it's better for them to reflect a bit. Ian said as he took out his smartphone. Then, turning to me with a grin, he added, "Let's boast about our life starting today. The revenge begins now." Ian deliberately took photos with the luxurious interior in view. He, then, sent them to Hugo, whose contact we had exchanged when we returned to the family home.
Hugo and the others will be shocked for sure. Let's send these daily. Oh, but this is just the beginning. They have much more to reflect on,
Ian said with a slightly menacing smile. I remembered that while Hugo has always been short-tempered and prone to tantrums, Ian was the one who was truly frightening when angry. It was amusing to see that some things never change. And I realized that I was finally able to laugh out loud. The next morning, Ian's smartphone apparently received a call from Hugo. Ian calmly said,
"It's amusing, so I'm ignoring it for now," and showed me the missed calls from Hugo.
The call log was filled with dozens of attempts.
Funny how he never bothers to contact us otherwise.
I couldn't help but exclaim. Ian, laughing, placed his smartphone on the table and called Hugo back, making sure to put it on speaker so we could all hear. Francis and I exchanged glances and held our breaths. After a few rings, Hugo answered, sounding very grumpy, and we nearly burst into laughter. "What's with that photo from yesterday? Don't tell me that's your place? There's no way you, who can barely hold a job, could afford such a life." Hugo's words sounded like nothing but sour grapes. He has always hated losing to his younger brother, Ian. Even for trivial faults, trying to demean him whenever possible. I remembered that was one of Hugo's worst traits.
Too bad, but that's my house. I know it must upset you that I'm more successful, but that's the reality,
Ian replied, almost singing. From the other end of the line, we could hear Hugo grinding his teeth, undoubtedly in frustration. As if you earned that money doing something decent. What kind of work are you even doing? You better not be involved in anything shady, bringing shame to our family. Perhaps he is trying hard to put on a tough act. His voice slightly trembling. Ian explained that he became a chef and now owns a prosperous restaurant, which, I learned later, is a high-end establishment frequented by political figures. Proudly declaring his success wouldn't make anyone laugh.
Mom will be taken care of by me from now on. Even if you ask, I won't give her back.
Ian emphasized again. Hugo responded, I won't ask her back. To which Ian smirked. It seems to be a hint to another plan in his mind.
I emailed a realtor yesterday, so they'll be visiting you. Please deal with them.
I immediately understood Ian's plan upon hearing this. And seeing my wide-eyed reaction, Ian chuckled with amusement.
Huh? A realtor? Why?
Because that house is in Mom's name. It's her property. Now that it's decided she'll live with us, we don't need the house. I'm thinking of selling it. Oh, and Hugo, you guys better vacate quickly since we plan to sell it as a vacant lot. Indeed, the house was registered in my name, and the land was inherited from my parents. What I do with it is entirely up to me.
Hey! Don't just do whatever you want. Mom would never allow such a thing.
Hugo raised his voice. I took a deep breath before responding. Hugo, I've decided to leave everything regarding the house to Ian. After thinking it over, it was ridiculous for me to shrink myself in that house. Tell Effie that too. Surprisingly, my words flowed smoothly and calmly. Over the phone, I could hear Effie saying, but the realtor came over, to which I declared, You were the ones who threw me out when I was in a dire state due to my illness. Now, it's my turn to cast you out. Hugo began shouting over the phone. His tantrum is making it hard to understand his words. It reminded me that he hadn't changed since he was a child. Always wanting to be the best, and throwing a fit when things didn't go his way. A child's tantrum might be cute, but it's unsightly for an adult man. And please tell Gavin that I'll be sending divorce papers. Words I never expected to say just slipped out. The realization that I wanted a divorce suddenly hit me. Yes, I'm getting a divorce. I repeated firmly to myself. Subsequently, the phone was bombarded with calls from my eldest son and his wife. The realtor completed their task unobtrusively, having been followed around and complained to by them during the appraisal. They had clearly communicated the situation about the eviction, leaving my eldest son and his wife. Especially Effie, in shock, started to consult Hugo. From this, it's apparent that Effie had her eyes on that land. Neglecting me while I was ill and not actively pursuing treatment was all to get her hands on that land sooner. Moreover, some of the medication given by the hospital was thrown away, never reaching me. I believe this was one of the reasons my health never improved. The revelation of Effie's plan to eliminate me sent shivers down my spine. Gavin, having received the divorce papers, called my smartphone repeatedly. I expected an apology, but the voicemail was filled with insults calling me selfish. There was no sign of remorse. Eventually, he even stated that living in my parents' house was a humiliation. Angry.
Then, please leave as soon as possible.
I left a message on Gavin's voicemail. The eldest son and his wife were first taken in by Effie's parents after being driven out of the family home. However, in their small apartment, there wasn't enough room, and I heard they were treated like nuisances. Gavin was quickly abandoned by the eldest son and his wife and ended up in a remote elderly care facility. He writes letters now, expressing a wish to live together again. Each time, I reply with nothing more than, "We are strangers now," and send it back. It's fine by me if he grows old somewhere I don't know. That's genuinely what I think. Hugo, staying with Effie's parents, is being treated poorly and feels mentally cornered. Given his need to be the most important, being treated as an inconvenience is a natural outcome. I wish he would reflect on his actions a bit. I believe that could lead to his growth. Since moving in with my younger son and his wife, my health has improved significantly. I feel as youthful and energetic as before, if not more so. Francis tells me not to worry about doing anything, but I enjoy cleaning and cooking along with the maid. I've even made friends of a similar age in the same condominium complex. We're planning a trip together soon. With the money from selling the family home's land, I'm not lacking anything. The thought of what would have happened if I hadn't been taken in by my younger son and his wife still scares me. What goes around, comes around, they say. Every day, I deeply feel that what you do to others really does come back to you.